Kate was a young writer looking for inspiration and a refuge for her words. The pressures of everyday life had exhausted her, and she longed for a peaceful retreat where she could find the peace and creativity she needed. It was then that, researching accommodation options online, she came across a country house by the sea, located in a small, isolated village. The photos of the place were idyllic, and the reviews praised the beauty of the setting and the tranquility of the environment. Kate, longing for a getaway that could spark her imagination, didn't hesitate to book. A few days later, she was on her way to the small coastal village, eager to begin her creative retreat. Upon arriving at the country house, she was amazed by the beauty of the place. The wooden residence, overlooking the ocean, was surrounded by lush forest. The setting seemed straight out of one of his stories. Kate couldn't wait to start writing. The first few days were peaceful and productive. The house was cozy, with large windows offering spectacular views of the ocean. The sound of the waves crashing onto the shore was relaxing, and Kate felt inspired to put her words on paper. She wrote for hours on end, losing track of time. At night, the full moon lit up the sky, creating a magical atmosphere. Kate watched the stars and thought about the stories she could create with that spectacular scenery as a backdrop. However, on the third night, the peace that Kate valued so much was disturbed. As she lay in bed, ready to sleep, she heard something that made her alert, subtle footsteps outside the house. At first, she attributed the noises to local fauna, to animals that roamed the forest. But as the night wore on, the footsteps became more frequent and deliberate. Kate, her heart racing, became alert. She tried to rationalize the situation, telling herself it must have been a deer or similar animal. However, fear began to set in, and Kate could barely close her eyes. The noises persisted for hours, and Kate's anxiety grew with each step. She tried to ignore them, burying her head under the pillow and pretending she was just being paranoid. Eventually, tiredness overcame her, and she fell asleep, dreaming of the unsettling sounds that surrounded her. Over the next few days, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. During breakfast, she noticed objects that were slightly out of place, as if someone had moved them while she was busy writing. She heard muffled sighs in the corners of the house, even when she was alone. Every time I left a room and came back, I had the impression that something had changed. Kate tried to maintain a good mood and rationalize these events, but she couldn't escape the feeling of vulnerability that haunted her. She began locking all the doors and windows before going to bed, even though the village was so peaceful that it seemed unnecessary. At night, the sound of footsteps continued, disturbing his sleep. Kate spent the night awake, listening to the unsettling noises. She was convinced that someone was hanging around the house, but she couldn't find the source of the sounds. His work was suffering, and anxiety was growing, making every night a nightmare. Kate thought about reporting what happened to the Airbnb owner, but was worried about appearing like she was making an unfounded complaint. However, fear and uneasiness did not leave her, and she began to consider the possibility of leaving the place. She didn't want to be defeated, but the feeling that something was terribly wrong was overwhelming. The days at the seaside cottage unfolded like a dark illusion for Kate. While the beauty of the coastal landscape continued to enchant her during the day, the nights were a test of resistance against the unknown that haunted her solitude. Kate tried to maintain her composure and focus on her work during daylight hours. She immersed herself in words, creating fictional worlds that made her escape the worries that surrounded her. However, the night was a different story. The subtle footsteps, which Kate had initially tried to dismiss as sounds of nature, became increasingly disturbing. On the third night in a row, when she was about to retire to her bed, the noises intensified. They seemed closer, as if someone was lurking directly outside their window. The moments of calm were interrupted by these enigmatic footsteps, as if some invisible presence was circling the house. Kate had the feeling that she was constantly being watched, a feeling that never left her, not even during the day. In addition to the nightly footsteps, she began to notice small changes in the house. Objects that had been left in a specific place were now in different locations, furniture slightly displaced. The feeling that someone or something was invading her privacy made her increasingly disturbed. Nights at the cottage became a daunting challenge. Kate was determined to confront whatever it was, but she didn't know where to start. She spent hours looking through the windows, trying to find the source of the footsteps and sounds, but was never able to identify any physical presence. Paranoia began to affect his work, and writing, which had previously flowed easily, was now a chore. Kate felt watched with every word she typed, as if someone were hovering over her shoulder, reading her words as they appeared on the screen. Each night was a battle to fall asleep, as the unsettling footsteps and mysterious whispers kept her awake. The feeling of vulnerability affected her deeply, and the beauty of the coastal setting could no longer compensate for the dark presence that loomed over the house. The situation was distressing, but Kate was reluctant to share it with anyone, worried about other people's judgment. She longed to prove to herself that she was just being paranoid, but the ominous presence surrounding her seemed insurmountable. Kate realized that she needed to do something to regain the peace she craved, and the only way out was to investigate the situation on her own. Determined to face her fears, she prepared to uncover the mystery that threatened to consume her. Kate was determined to solve the mystery surrounding the seaside cottage. The constant feeling of being watched and the unsettling footsteps at night had driven her into a state of persistent anxiety. No matter how hard she tried to convince herself that she was being paranoid, her intuition insisted that something was terribly wrong. One night, as she sat in her room writing, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the living room. This time, the feeling of terror was overwhelming. Kate knew she needed to investigate the source of these unsettling noises. With courage, she walked down the stairs slowly, each step feeling like an eternity. When he reached the ground floor, the living room was plunged into darkness, only the dim moonlight streaming through the windows providing a limited view. The silence was almost deafening, and Kate's heart was pounding. And then, like an ominous apparition in the middle of the room, Kate saw a strange man. His eyes were empty, and he smiled in a disturbing way. The air was thick with tension as she whispered, "Who are you?" The man didn't respond right away, as if he was absorbing the fear that hung in the air. He took a step forward, approaching Kate with an even more sinister smile. His empty eyes seemed to penetrate her soul. "I knew you would come. I knew I would find you here," the man said in an enigmatic whisper. Terror gripped Kate, and she screamed in panic. She could no longer bear the terrifying presence of that man in her home. With a quick movement, she ran back to her room, locking the door with all her strength. Outside, the strange man tried to open the door, knocking hard. His screams were menacing, and Kate could hear incoherent words echoing down the hall. She picked up her phone and frantically dialed the police, begging for help. "Help! Someone is trying to break into my house. Please send the police." Kate pleaded with tears in her eyes as terror dominated her being. The wait for help seemed like an eternity. With every knock on the door and every terrifying scream from the man outside, Kate's despair grew. She wondered if anyone would arrive in time to save her. Her heart was beating wildly, and she felt like she was on the verge of collapse. Finally, the sounds of police sirens cut through the night air. Kate heard footsteps approaching her door, and the authoritative voice of an officer reassured her. The door was opened, and the police entered, arresting the sinister man threatening Kate's life. The gloomy atmosphere that had settled in the country house finally dissipated. The mystery man was handcuffed and taken into custody by police. Kate was terrified, but at the same time relieved to be safe. A subsequent investigation revealed that the man had hacked the Airbnb booking system, obtaining Kate's personal information and planning her presence at the cottage. He had a dark fixation on her and had tracked her every move since her arrival in the village. Kate ended her Airbnb stay and returned to her previous life, carrying the trauma of the experience. The beautiful seaside village had lost its charm, and the country house that once seemed like a refuge had become a haunted place in her memory. Although the nightmare was over, Kate could not forget the feeling of terror that had consumed her during her retreat. The story spread through the village and among local residents, serving as a grim reminder that danger can lurk in online accommodation bookings, even in the most idyllic places. The episode left Kate deeply scarred, reminding her that the unknown and danger can intertwine in terrifying ways. The mysterious man's ominous presence was now in police custody, but Kate still couldn't shake the feeling of terror that had consumed her in that seaside cottage. Although the nightmare was over, the trauma lingered, like a shadow that constantly haunted her. Kate returned to her former life, returning to her home in the city, but the beauty of the coastal village had lost its charm. The memories of the unsettling footsteps and the sinister man still haunted her. The country house that once seemed like a peaceful retreat was now a haunted place in his mind. She struggled to resume her writing, but inspiration seemed distant. The sounds of the night, once so full of promise and magic, were now a dark scream that took her back to the nights of terror in the country house. Every word typed brought back unwanted memories. Although the nightmare was over, the story spread throughout the village and among local residents, serving as a grim reminder that danger can lurk in online accommodation bookings, even in the most idyllic places. The village was now known not only for its natural beauty, but also for the haunting history that had occurred on its shores. Kate often wondered about the mystery man. What drove him to pursue it so doggedly? She never received a clear answer, but she knew that the trauma of the experience had left deep scars in her mind. The unknown and danger intertwined in terrifying ways, and Kate was determined to overcome the fears that had haunted her. The young writer, despite all the adversity, continued her journey. She wrote about her traumatic experience, transforming it into a powerful narrative of overcoming and resistance. Her writing became therapy, a way to process what had happened and share her story with the world. Over time, Kate found the strength to face her own fears and return to the creative process she was passionate about. She would not allow the nightmare she had experienced to define her, but instead turned it into a source of inspiration. His words came to life, conveying the message that even in the darkest moments, resilience and determination can prevail. The story of the seaside cottage has become a legend in the village, a grim reminder that danger may be closer than we imagine. Locals have learned to be more vigilant, to share information about strangers, and to never underestimate the power of a scary story. However, Kate continued her journey, finding strength in her words and the experiences that shaped her life. She knew the unknown could be scary, but she also believed the power of resilience in overcoming was undeniable. As time passed, the trauma of the cottage became a distant memory, and Kate found a new balance in her life. She wrote about the horror she faced and how courage and determination helped her overcome the terror. Her story became a lesson in the importance of facing fears, no matter how terrifying they may be. And so the seaside cottage remained in the village as a grim memory, a reminder that the unknown and danger can manifest themselves in unexpected ways. But it has also become a symbol of overcoming, a testimony to the power of resilience and the strength of human will in the face of the greatest adversity. For Kate, the cottage was no longer a place of fear, but rather a place where she found the courage to face her worst nightmares and emerge stronger than ever.